segue us into the next segment then, Capuchin Monkey.
Well, we may be excited for more MCU movies, but the box office certainly is not, as Black Widow has dropped a bit in its second weekend, um, being released in theaters. What do you think
I
about
liked
this?
I liked your other one better.
Yeah, I
Um,
did too. I did too.
That's okay. I threw you off the deep end for that one. Yeah. So this is our last topic before we get into the mock draft. But I wanted to talk about this because I think there are a lot of interesting headlines going around about Black Widow's box office that I think some are reasonable and I think some are being taken out of context a little bit. And I think it's just important to kind of keep everything in perspective here. So, for those of you who don't know, Black Widow made about, I think, $80 million at the US box office in its opening weekend. But on top of that, thank you. But on top of that, it also made, I believe, $60 million on Disney Plus as well. So, in the first weekend at home being the United States where we are, it made about $140 million, which honestly, for any film is really good, but even for a Marvel film, that is still honestly not bad at all. I know Endgame makes 300 million and all that sort of stuff, but it made a really decent amount of money, and I think it crossed that $200 million globally pretty quickly after that. The headlines though that have been going around are basically circling the fact that Black Widow had something like a 67% drop in its second weekend, which I believe is the highest or one of the highest second week drops of any Marvel film. And the question here becomes, why, first of all? But then the question also becomes, is it a product of the fact that Black Widow isn't a good movie to most people? Is it a product of the fact that Black Widow, this is like a new normal for Marvel, that maybe their movies just aren't interesting to people anymore after Endgame? Because this is the first movie after the Infinity Saga wrapped up. And I'm pretty sure that, Spider-Man Far From Home kind of rode the high of Endgame a couple months after that film came out. So it had a bit of a boost. But then Black Widow coming out over 2 years later, might have had some problems. So the questions become, why did this happen? And is it going to keep happening? I'll quickly just give a couple thoughts and then I'll turn it over to you. But I think that there are a lot of things to keep in mind here with this box office drop. But I do think that the important thing to note here is that this, again, given the fact that anything could change within the next year in terms of how Disney releases their films, Disney Plus and the same day streaming and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that if we're going to assume that someday the theaters will return to normal, some semblance of normalcy, and Marvel will release their films in that same way, that this is an exception and it's not the rule anymore. And I say this because, not to get too real worldy here, but the pandemic is still very much a thing in the United States, at least, even though, things are getting better. And I think that while people are feeling a little better about going to the theater, it still might be an indication that for people like us, for example, I have not seen Black Widow again in theaters, and I don't think I expect to, simply because of the fact that, just continuing to go to the theaters over and over again like I might have normally maybe isn't something that I or, a lot of other people might be comfortable with at this point in time. And I think that that's one of the big factors that were reflected in the second week drop. The fact that people were like, yeah, we like the diehard Marvel fans and the big fans were like, we wanted to see it first and then we're good. Like, we went to the theaters and it was great. And obviously the second thing is the fact that it released on Disney Plus at the same time. Now, the thing about the Disney Plus release, I believe the fact is that if you buy it once for that $30, then you get to keep that movie indefinitely. And I believe that was the case with Mulan as well, which I made the unfortunate decision of using the Premier Access, and that was a mistake. You can go check that review out. It was not a good time. But all that to say is that, people will buy the movie for $30 and they'll get to keep it and watch it for as many times as they want. And that obviously will hurt the amount of money that they can make. Because again, if you watch the movie 2 or 3 times, you've made your money back. Just like that. And so I think that, look, it's not a great sign necessarily. It's not like we're jumping up and down for joy that Black Widow made $80 million at the theaters this weekend. But at the same time, I also think that it's just about context and it's about perspective and realizing that, again, this is not an Avengers Endgame level movie for one. It is, releasing on Disney Plus at the same time too. And also the pandemic is still going on at the same time. So again, those are just my quick thoughts. But I mean, I'll throw it over to you, Mr. Capuchin Monkey. Is there anything that you think, like, do you think this is going to continue with Shang-Chi? Do you think Shang-Chi is going to suffer the same way? Eternals, what do you think about that?
Yeah, those are all great points. I think, especially with the Disney Plus thing, people who want it, like as soon as it was available, they can just buy it on Disney Plus, and then that's them spending their money on it. So you aren't going to see like repeat viewings or anything showing up in the box office money for subsequent weeks. I also think that because it's on Disney Plus so early, the quality of pirated copies of the movie is significantly higher, and therefore people are more likely to just pirate the movie, which I think could be a contributing factor. And also, I think if Disney had employed a release strategy more like Warner Brothers, where they're releasing it in theaters for, I believe, 30 days or a month or something like that, and then releasing it on HBO Max, that allows for people to go who want the theater experience to have a longer amount of time to go do that before just deciding to purchase it on streaming. And that could also be a factor, I think. I don't think that Disney's pay $30 as soon as it's released strategy worked out the best for them in this case.
Right. And I think, depending on what the new normal situation is, because I agree. I think that with certain studios saying, yeah, we're going to just put out our movie in theaters for like 30 to 45 days and then you can stream it and whatever. I think that's closer to what a new normal might look like at some point in the future. I think that unfortunately Black Widow was in the position where it just got caught in a lot of different circumstances. And, again, the box office will be affected. Like, it's not going to make, I don't think, and I could be totally wrong about this, but I don't think Black Widow is going to make $500 million. I would see it optimistically at 400, 450, maybe, tapping out. Again, it still has to release in a bunch of global markets, but again, the world is a crazy place right now, so we'll see how that goes. But, when we look back at the box office numbers, we're not going to see it and go, oh, it's like Incredible Hulk, which made, I think, like $300 million or something. Like, oh, it's like Captain America 1 box office. Like, nobody, is going to really look at it that way because it's just a very different time and a different place that it was released,
Yeah, exactly. And I think as the vaccination rates continue to increase and everything, and people become more and more confident in going to theaters, I think this will happen. And with the addition of not being released on Disney Plus as well, I think Shang-Chi and Eternals, and especially by the time we get to Spider-Man No Way Home, there's going to be a lot more money to be made for Marvel.
Right, absolutely. So, we're not very worried, is our bottom line. I mean, again, Marvel and Disney, they're doing just fine.